Have you ever experienced a coincidence so perfect, so meaningful, that it seems impossible to attribute it to mere chance? That book you mentioned appears in a conversation the very next day. You think of someone and seconds later receive their call. You need an answer, and suddenly, in the most unexpected place, you find exactly what you were looking for. What many call coincidences, Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant and revolutionary psychologists in history, called synchronicity. And according to him, these aren't simple coincidences. They're messages from the universe, signs guiding you toward your true purpose. Today we're going to dive into this fascinating Jungian concept that could completely transform the way you perceive your reality. Because when you learn to read these signs, when you begin to understand the language of the universe, your life becomes a much more meaningful and connected journey. But first, let me ask you, how many meaningful coincidences have you dismissed simply because they didn't fit into your rational view of the world? How many messages might you have overlooked because you were too busy, too distracted, or simply not ready to listen? Jung discovered that most of us have been trained to ignore these signs. The modern world, with its emphasis on the tangible, the measurable, the scientifically provable, has conditioned us to discard anything that can't be explained by direct causality. But in doing so, we're closing the door to an entire dimension of our existence. Synchronicity, according to Jung, is an acausal connecting principle. In simple terms, it means there exists a meaningful relationship between events that cannot be explained by traditional cause and effect. It's not that one event causes the other, but rather that both are connected by the meaning they hold for you. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you felt that something was too much of a coincidence? That feeling isn't an illusion. It's your unconscious recognizing a pattern, detecting a signal that your conscious mind might not be ready to process. Jung spent decades studying this phenomenon, not just in his patients but in his own life. He discovered that synchronicities tend to appear at critical moments of transformation, in periods of significant transition, or when we're facing important decisions. It's as if the universe is trying to communicate with us precisely when we need guidance the most. But how does this really work? Jung proposed a revolutionary explanation, the collective unconscious. This concept suggests that beyond our personal unconscious, there exists a deeper layer of the psyche that all human beings share. This layer contains archetypes, universal symbols, and shared experiences that transcend time and space. When you experience a synchronicity, according to Jung, you're momentarily perceiving the interconnection between your inner and outer worlds through this universal layer. It's as if for an instant, the veil separating the visible from the invisible becomes transparent, allowing you to glimpse the invisible web that connects all things. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you're considering a major change in your life, perhaps leaving a secure job to pursue a passion or ending a relationship that no longer nurtures you. For days, weeks perhaps, you've been turning this decision over in your mind without reaching a clear conclusion. Then, without looking for it, you start to notice a pattern. Maybe 3 different people, with no connection between them, mention a specific book to you. Or perhaps you begin to see the same symbol repeatedly in a magazine, on a street sign, in the pattern of a fabric. Or maybe you meet someone who made exactly the same decision you're contemplating, and their story deeply resonates with you. From a purely rational perspective, you could dismiss these experiences as meaningless coincidences. But Jung invites us to consider them as something more. Messages, signs that your unconscious is recognizing because they contain valuable information for your individuation process. The journey toward becoming who you truly are. The question now is, how can we open ourselves to these signs? How can we learn to read this subtle but deeply meaningful language? The first step, according to Jung, is to develop what he called the symbolic attitude. This means being willing to see beyond the surface of things, to recognize that the events, people, or objects in our lives may have a meaning that goes beyond their immediate appearance. To cultivate this attitude, Jung recommended several practices. The first, and perhaps most important, is to pay attention. We live in a world that values speed, productivity, and constant stimulation. We're perpetually distracted by our devices, by media noise, by the endless tasks on our to-do lists. In this state of fragmented attention, it's practically impossible to perceive synchronicities. Take a moment right now, breathe deeply, observe your immediate surroundings. What do you notice? Is there something that stands out, something that attracts your attention in a way you can't rationally explain? This simple act of conscious observation is the beginning of a deeper relationship with synchronicities. Another fundamental aspect is keeping a record of your dreams. Jung considered dreams as direct messages from the unconscious, windows to that part of ourselves that is connected to the collective unconscious. Often, synchronicities are preceded or accompanied by significant dreams containing related symbols or themes. Each morning, before the demands of the day dissolve your dream memories, take a few minutes to write them down. Don't worry if at first you only remember fragments or isolated images. With practice, your ability to remember and understand your dreams will significantly improve. Jung also emphasized the importance of what he called amplification, the process of exploring all possible connections and meanings associated with a synchronistic symbol or event. When you experience a synchronicity, ask yourself, what might this mean for me at this specific moment in my life? What associations does it evoke? What emotion does it awaken in me? Don't look for immediate answers or rigid definitions. Synchronicities don't work like simple codes to decipher. They're more like invitations to a deeper dialogue with yourself and with the world around you. One of the most fascinating aspects of synchronicities is that they tend to multiply once you start paying attention to them. It's as if the communication channel between your conscious mind and your unconscious strengthens with use, allowing a more consistent flow of meaningful messages. But here comes an important warning. Not all coincidences are synchronicities. Jung was very clear about this. For a coincidence to qualify as synchronicity, it must have a deep personal meaning for you. It must resonate at a level that goes beyond mere intellectual curiosity. Imagine this. You're thinking about buying a red car, and suddenly you start seeing red cars everywhere. Is this a synchronicity? Probably not. It's more likely an example of what psychologists call confirmation bias, the tendency to notice information that confirms what's already on your mind. A true synchronicity has a numinous, almost sacred quality. It produces a feeling of awe, of deep meaning, often accompanied by a physical reaction, chills, inexplicable tears, or a sudden mental clarity. It's as if, for a moment, you could perceive the underlying order in the apparent chaos of the universe. Now, it's important to understand that synchronicities are not supernatural or magical phenomena, although they may sometimes seem that way. Jung, despite his openness to the spiritual, always maintained a rigorous and scientific approach in his work. He saw synchronicities as manifestations of an ordering principle in the universe that conventional science had not yet been able to fully explain. In modern physics, especially quantum mechanics, we find concepts that resonate surprisingly with Jung's ideas. The principle of non-locality, for example, suggests that particles that have interacted in the past maintain an instantaneous connection regardless of the distance separating them. This phenomenon, which Einstein called spooky action at a distance, has fascinating parallels with Jungian synchronicity. But beyond theoretical explanations, what's truly important is how synchronicities can transform your everyday life. When you begin to perceive and work with them, several profound changes occur. First, you develop greater trust in your intuition. Synchronicities often confirm what you already know intuitively, but perhaps haven't allowed yourself to fully accept. They're like external validations of your inner wisdom. Second, you experience a greater sense of connection with the world around you. You no longer feel like an isolated observer of reality, but as an active participant in a meaningful network of relationships and events. Third, and perhaps most importantly, synchronicities guide you toward your individuation process, the path to becoming who you truly are meant to be. Jung considered individuation as the central purpose of human life and saw synchronicities as crucial signals on this journey. Think of a time in your life when you felt completely lost, not knowing which direction to take. Do you remember any significant coincidences that occurred during that period? Something that, looking back, seems to have been exactly what you needed to find your way. Synchronicities abound, especially in moments of crisis and transformation. Jung noted that they appear with particular frequency during what he called the dark night of the soul, those periods of profound confusion, loss, or transition that we all experience at some point. In these moments, when our usual structures of meaning crumble, when our mental maps no longer seem to apply to the territory we're traversing, synchronicities can be beacons in the darkness, signs assuring us that, although we may not see the complete path, we are moving in the right direction. One of the most beautiful aspects of synchronicities is that they are deeply personal. The same coincidence that is loaded with meaning for you might go completely unnoticed by someone else. This is because synchronicities speak the unique language of your psyche, using symbols and connections that specifically resonate with your personal history, your current concerns, and your future potential. Jung often described how the same archetypes, those universal images and themes that inhabit the collective unconscious, express themselves in unique ways in each individual. Similarly, synchronicities, although arising from that shared field of meaning, manifest in ways that are precisely relevant to your unique situation. This leads us to another important dimension of synchronicities. They are not just passive signals to interpret, but active invitations to growth. When you pay attention to a synchronicity, you're entering into a dialogue with deeper aspects of your being. You're consciously participating in your individuation process. Jung firmly believed that individuation, the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche to become a whole and authentic being, is the central task of human life. And synchronicities are crucial tools in this process, often pointing to areas of the psyche that require attention, or unrealized potentials seeking expression. When we systematically ignore synchronicities and other expressions of the unconscious, we pay a price. Jung observed that many of the psychological symptoms that brought his patients to therapy, anxiety, depression, a sense of existential emptiness, were actually manifestations of a disconnection from the natural process of individuation. The unconscious, according to Jung, is always seeking balance, wholeness. When our conscious life deviates too far from this path, the unconscious tries to communicate with us through dreams, synchronicities, physical or emotional symptoms. Listening to these signals is not an esoteric indulgence, it's a fundamental psychological necessity. Imagine you've been in a job for years that offers financial security but doesn't resonate with your deeper values or natural talents. Your conscious mind, conditioned by fear and social expectations, tells you that you should stay. But your unconscious knows that this path is taking you away from your true self. How might it communicate with you? Perhaps through recurring dreams of being trapped or lost. Perhaps through physical symptoms that mysteriously appear during the work week and disappear on weekends. Or perhaps through synchronicities, chance, encounters with people who have made the leap to more fulfilling careers, or books and articles that appear in your path talking about the courage to follow your true vocation. If you ignore these signals, it's likely that the voice of the unconscious will become increasingly louder, sometimes manifesting as crises that force you to pay attention. As Jung said, what you resist persists, what you accept transforms you. Learning to work with synchronicities is not just a way to avoid these crises. It's a way to actively partner with your unconscious in creating a fuller, more meaningful life. But what happens when you start paying attention to synchronicities and aren't sure how to interpret them? Jung suggested a patient and reflective approach. It's not about quickly reaching conclusions or seeking definitive interpretations. It's more a process of ongoing dialogue, of curious and open exploration. When you encounter a significant synchronicity, take time to reflect on it. Write about the experience in detail. Notice not just what happened, but also how you felt, what thoughts arose, what memories or associations it evoked. Often, the meaning isn't immediately obvious, but gradually reveals itself through this process of reflection. Jung also recommended amplifying the synchronistic symbol or event, exploring its possible meanings from multiple angles. This might include researching its historical or cultural significance, reflecting on its role in your own dreams or fantasies, or considering how it appears in myths or traditional stories that are meaningful to you. A particularly powerful aspect of synchronicities is their ability to connect your individual experience with universal themes. Jung believed that archetypes, universal patterns that appear in myths, religions, and cultures around the world, often manifest through synchronicities as part of the individuation process. For example, you might be going through a period of profound personal transformation and notice synchronicities related to symbols of death and rebirth. The butterfly emerging from the chrysalis, the phoenix rising from the ashes, the snake shedding its skin. These archetypal symbols, which appear in cultures around the world, are connecting your personal experience with a universal pattern of transformation. This connection with the universal can be deeply comforting and orienting. It helps you recognize that although your path is unique, the challenges and transitions you face are part of the shared human experience. You are not alone in your journey. You are participating in a process that has been lived and represented by countless people throughout history. Jung observed that synchronicities tend to increase significantly during periods of deep psychological transformation. When you are on the threshold of an important change, when old structures are dissolving and new ones haven't yet taken shape, synchronicities can emerge as compasses in unknown territory. These synchronicities often have an initiatory character. They provide you with exactly the information, support, or direction you need to take the next step in your evolution. They might appear as encounters with people who become mentors, discoveries of books or teachings that illuminate your path, or even seemingly negative events that, in time, reveal themselves as necessary catalysts for your growth. One of the most powerful synchronicities that Jung observed in his clinical practice was what he called synchronistic transference, when a patient dreamed of material or symbols that Jung was privately studying without having shared this with the patient. For Jung, this demonstrated the reality of the collective unconscious and the ability of the psyche to transcend conventional boundaries of space and time. You too may experience similar forms of psychic resonance. Perhaps you've thought of a friend you haven't spoken to in a long time, only to receive their call moments later. Or maybe you've had a dream about someone who is going through a crisis of which you had no conscious knowledge. These experiences, according to Jung, are not coincidences or supernatural psychic powers, but manifestations of our interconnection at the level of the collective unconscious. Now, it's important to address a common misunderstanding about synchronicities. They're not events that occur to fulfill our wishes or confirm our existing beliefs. In fact, the most significant synchronicities often challenge us, point out our blind spots, or invite us to expand our understanding beyond its current limits. Jung emphasized that the unconscious is not at our service. Rather, we are invited to serve the greater process of individuation. Synchronicities aren't there to make us feel good or to confirm what we already think. They're there to guide us toward greater wholeness, which sometimes may involve facing uncomfortable truths or rejected aspects of ourselves. This brings us to one of the most important concepts in Jungian psychology, the shadow. The shadow represents those parts of ourselves that we have repressed, denied, or rejected because they don't fit with our conscious image. Interestingly, synchronicities are often related to shadow material, pointing to aspects of ourselves that need to be recognized and integrated. For example, if you've repressed your creativity for years to pursue a practical career, you might start noticing synchronicities related to artistic expression. Repeatedly encountering people who have changed course to follow their creative passion, or discovering objects or situations that remind you of your forgotten love for art. These synchronicities aren't random. They're messages from your psyche, trying to restore balance and guide you toward a more complete expression of who you are. But recognizing and integrating these shadow aspects requires courage. It means challenging the narratives you've built about yourself and opening up to possibilities that may seem threatening to your established identity. Jung described the shadow not just as a repository of repressed material, but also as a source of vitality and unrealized potential. When you begin to work with your synchronicities and integrate the shadow aspects they reveal to you, you often experience a release of psychic energy that was trapped in the effort of keeping these aspects out of consciousness. This released energy can manifest as greater creativity, renewed vitality, more authentic and meaningful relationships, or a deeper sense of purpose and direction in life. It's as if, by responding to synchronicities and working with the material they present to you, you're unlocking internal resources that were always there, waiting to be recognized. One of the most transformative aspects of learning to read the signs of the universe is that it fundamentally changes your relationship with life itself. Instead of seeing yourself as an isolated being in an indifferent universe, you begin to perceive that you are part of an interconnected web of meaning. The events of your life no longer seem random or meaningless, but elements of a greater pattern that is unfolding. This doesn't mean that everything is predetermined, or that you don't have free will. On the contrary, Jung saw individuation as a co-creative process in which you consciously participate in the unfolding of your unique potential. Synchronicities are invitations to this co-creation, signs that help you align with your most authentic path. In the accelerated and fragmented world we live in, where attention is scattered among endless distractions and deep connection is often sacrificed on the altar of efficiency and productivity, learning to recognize and work with synchronicities can be a revolutionary act. It's reclaiming a form of knowledge that our culture has systematically devalued, the wisdom of intuition, of symbol, of meaningful connection. And although Jung developed these concepts decades ago, they are surprisingly relevant for our time. In an era of increasing alienation, anxiety, and crisis of meaning, his invitation to reconnect with the deeper dimensions of the psyche and to perceive the inherent meaning in the events of our lives offers a powerful antidote to modern nihilism and fragmentation. So I invite you to begin or to deepen your own journey with synchronicities. Start simply by paying attention. Cultivate what Buddhists call beginner's mind, an attitude of openness, curiosity, and wonder at what life presents to you. Keep a journal of your dreams and the synchronicities you experience, no matter how small they may seem. Over time, you'll begin to recognize patterns, to understand the unique language through which your unconscious communicates with you. And remember that this is not a path you need to walk alone. Jung created a community of students and colleagues with whom to explore these territories of the psyche. You too can benefit from sharing your experiences with others who are on a similar path. Through the comments on this video, I invite you to share your own experiences with synchronicities and how they have influenced your life. What has been the most significant synchronicity you've experienced? How did it change your perspective or guide you at a crucial moment? Your story might be exactly what another member of this community needs to hear. And if this message has resonated with you, if you feel that spark of recognition suggesting there's something here for you, consider subscribing to this channel and turning on notifications. We'll continue exploring together the depths of Jungian psychology and how it can illuminate and enrich your life path. Synchronicities remind us that we live in a universe not just of matter and energy, but also of meaning. We are not separate from the fabric of reality. We are integral threads in that fabric, constantly co-creating our future through the dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious, between the visible and the invisible. As Jung himself said, synchronicity is a phenomenon that seems to suggest that there is a world behind the world we see, a pattern beneath the seemingly random events. Learning to perceive and work with this deeper pattern is not just a path to self-knowledge, it's a doorway to a richer, more meaningful, and more magical way of being in the world. So the next time you experience one of those strange coincidences that seem too meaningful to be casual, pause, breathe, pay attention. The universe might be whispering exactly what you need to hear at this moment in your journey. Thank you for joining me in this exploration. Remember, the signs are everywhere. The question is, are you ready to see them?